Welcome to today's episode of the Getting Intimate podcast. And today we're exploring trauma work and how connecting with ourselves through our bodies can open up for healing. And our guide is Gunilla Hamne, a journalist, trainer, and therapist specialized in trauma and somatic therapies. Gunilla works with a trauma tapping technique that she has brought all over the world, all the way from Rwanda, where she is right now. So, welcome, Gunilla.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for the invitation. That's wonderful to be with you. Far away a bit. I think it's 7,000 kilometers away from Sweden.
That is far away. And
That's far
and
away.
it's such a privilege to have you there when we talk about this. I think
Yeah,
that's just beautiful.
thank
And I
you.
wanted to start from the beginning actually, because before you became a trauma specialist, before you developed this
Mm,
technique, you were working as a journalist and you were
yes.
working mainly in developing countries all over the world.
Mm, mm,
So I've been that too. And I know that like the camera and my recorder and my notebook, it kind of becomes this shield between me and who I'm interviewing. So I was wondering if you could tell us about that moment when you realized documenting the truth wasn't enough
yeah.
anymore.
Yeah, to catch a story with all the nuances, you need to ask so many questions and very
Mm,
detailed questions. And specifically, the project I was working with when the change of my career started was I was working for a child rights project, interviewing children in many different parts of the world who had been, their rights had been violated in different ways. So this was actually, I say that was my turning point when in the part that is today South Sudan, but at that time it was still part of Sudan, very challenged area. And as we know from the news today also, it's
mm,
continuing. So I was sitting with this young girl. She was perhaps 12 years old and had been kidnapped and used as a slave and then brought back by some people from South Sudanese organization. So she was back home. But then for the story, I needed to ask her about what happened when she was kidnapped. And of course, a lot of horrible things had happened. Little by little, you feel like, this person, the more detailed questions you ask, because you need to know, so like that, what time of the day was it? How did
mm,
it smell? What did it feel like? Where was your mother? Where was your father? What happened? Was it burning? You ask all these questions that engage your senses. And the more you engage your senses, the more vivid becomes the memory. And that's very good for your story. But the risk is that you leave somebody with an open wound. And that's what I was feeling. And that was not the first time. But it was really there where it happened that I felt like, no, this is not what I want to do. I want to see if there's something I can do instead to change that for people. And that's how it started. And finally I found this one of these tapping techniques and realized that this is so simple and so good that I can actually come back to some of the places where I've been as a journalist and offer something that actually heals, not only open the wounds, but you can help people to heal the wounds of what has happened to them. Yeah. So thank you for asking.
Could you explain a little bit what TTE is for somebody who doesn't know?
Yeah, tapping is. When I started, because that what I was relating to happened like 2004, and when I found the first, when I did my first training in one modality of tapping, which is called thought field therapy (TFT), it was in 2006. So at that time, it was like very little known, especially in Sweden. It had been used. But tapping, then, to explain it, is you use certain, in a way, you could call it healing points on the body. They are correlated with acupuncture points. That's how it was found from the beginning. These points are, according to what one found, has less resistance to go into your nervous system. What actually happens is that you tap on certain points, and through that tapping, you touch a skin. The skin is our biggest sense, will create an electrochemical reaction in the body. It also sends signals through your nervous system, like signals of peace and calm, to that
Mm,
part of your brain that holds the emotional regulation. One part being hippocampus, another part being amygdala. also some other things happened. So there's a lot of research today. It wasn't at that time. I could just see this this works. That's what I saw. This works, and it costs nothing to share it with others. That was my starting point.
So if you like the very first time, so you learned it and you were part of developing it too, I think,
Yeah.
this particular. So the first time you brought it somewhere, what was that like? And where was it?
I mean, so I learned one modality which was developed in the US, as I say, by a psychotherapist, Callahan. I looked for somebody who was trained in the same. I found a professor of psychology in the US who had written a scientific article that we had had during our training. I contacted him and I sent what I say my most life-changing email. You know, sometimes we are a bit bold. You know, I think like, okay, he has written this article. That's probably the person I would like to learn from, because since I had this experience, as you're relating to, working as a journalist in many parts of the world and working also a lot with human rights organization, I had experience from places where this would be very good to share. So I wrote to him and said that, you know, I have learned this TFT, thought field therapy, and I would like to share it with people in other parts of the world. And I see that you have been to Kosovo. He had also been to some other countries. And, you know, could I learn from you? Are you having some plans to go somewhere? And then he actually replied, and I was looking at it because I'm doing some writing about that part of my, you know, journey in this field. And he actually answered within, I think, 24 hours. He answered, this professor of psychology, and said that, no, I don't really have any plans, but if you have some suggestions where we could go, I will come with you. I will teach you what I can if you do the documentation, because I had written that I was a journalist. That became the deal. And then he wrote that, you know, just give me 6 months to earn for the ticket, because nobody would pay for us going. So we would pay for ourselves. And that's what we did. That was in September 2006. I just finished my training in the TFT. He had been working with it for 10 years in the war, in the Veterans Administration hospitals in the US. And 6 months later, we did go. And we went to this country, to Rwanda. And why? Yes, because through the projects I had been working with in children's rights, I knew people here. So that has been the journey through this whole time. I will never come to a place without knowing anybody. So I wrote to them and asked, what do you think? To those I knew here, they were all orphans of the genocide that occurred here in 1994. And they said, yeah, that would be wonderful, because we have realized that they, you know, they are traumatized. We didn't understand that, but they cannot focus on studies. You know, there's so many symptoms of trauma. So that's how it started. And that was February 2007. So that's soon to be 20 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. and, and so one of the things that I've seen how you teach this kind of like is through song and dance.
Yeah.
So why is that? Like what, or how did
Yeah.
it start?
Yeah, I mean, thank you for asking, because that's really my favorite part of this. And yeah, because, you know, when you are stressed or traumatized, it's like your whole system is out of rhythm. You start having jerky movements, things do not connect in your brain. There are many things that you could relate to rhythm when you have those higher levels of stress in your body. So, but I didn't think about that. It was me and one of my Rwandan colleagues. We were at one time invited to a country in West Africa, Sierra Leone, because they had a long reconciliation process there after a civil war that was portrayed in a film called Blood Diamonds with Leonardo DiCaprio, that many have seen. So we were invited there and went to villages together with an organization that we were invited by called Fumble Talk. They had mobilized women who were all widows after the civil war. They came from all different corners to this place where the meeting was held under the village tree, often a kola nut tree. We showed the tapping. At that time, we had simplified this tapping that I learned originally to this TTT, trauma tapping technique, without anybody saying anything. But for them, so evident, they started to do a rhythm. In one village, it was a rhythm like this, and then somebody made some words, and then everybody sang, you know, like call and response, constantly call and response, which is also something that is, according also to science, something that is very healing. and makes you feel safe because you're doing something together with others. So that's how it started. This women took initiative to that. And why? Yeah, that's their way of remembering things. They
Mm.
create a rhythm, some words, and then everybody learned because we repeated many times, or they repeated. It was not what we did; it was them who repeated. And then they went back to the villages and shared. So then we
Mm.
saw that, wow, this is really beautiful, and it becomes so much more fun because that's what you do, isn't it?
Yeah.
Dance and sing together. So yeah, and then we have been doing this. Not we, we also. We are, my colleague Ulf is also a musician, so he has written several songs. But then others have taken initiative in other parts, like here in Rwanda, like 4 or 5 songs. Somebody did one just the other day when I was here in Congo, and did one, and so we have many by now. So
They make their own songs. Like
yeah,
they,
yeah.
it's so.
It's not us saying anything, and from the beginning I had no idea. It was just something that happened, and then we got the idea. Okay, of course.
And I also really love that it's not one right song. This is the song to learn this. It's
Yeah,
different songs depending on where you are and who they are and what they would like to
yeah,
do with it.
yeah.
Mm. So,
And then we can share. I mean, sometimes we have videos of this, so we show it, and then others will say that I was in a prison here in Rwanda. They showed one video of one song that the Rwandan singer had made, and then 3 of them interns, they said that, oh, I'm also a musician, I also want to make a song. And then the next time I came there were 3 new songs.
so what's the change you see? Like when they start using the tapping,
Ah,
what's the change you
oh,
see or hear
yeah,
about?
I could tell you thousands of stories. It is then deep relaxation for the most people. And then you could say that for some, just doing this tapping, I mean, you tap on
Mm.
points in your face, on your chest, and on your hand. And for some, it is something that happens like this. And for others, it's what we call more layers of an onion. You take layer by layer by layer. But the change can be, if I would say the most common, is that if you have a training one day, and then the next day, people come back, and then at least several of them would say, oh, you know what, I slept like a baby, somebody had to wake me up, and that has not happened for so long, because
Mm.
they've been living with nightmares, bad sleep, because that is one of the first symptoms if you have been through something very difficult, because your
Mm.
brain says it's dangerous to sleep. I mean, it's natural, because it's all a question of life-saving mechanisms of our system. So sleeping, of course, anybody can understand that if you have been in danger, because the brain just says, watch out, watch out, watch out. And that can mean no sleep, because what can happen if you fall asleep and if you relax? So that, I would say, is one of the most common comments.
Mm.
Otherwise, somebody would say, oh, I feel sleepy. I feel like sleeping. But then symptoms like nightmares disappear for very many. And at the same time, we never promise anything that this will happen or this is what's going to be the result. Never. It's just that, it's an offer. I can tell stories like now, what has happened to other people, but I will never promise anything, because everybody's different.
Mm. One of the things I wanted to ask is, do people ever think it's too simple? Like, does
Oh,
the
yes.
simplicity kind of
Yes.
like offend them?
You can just imagine here in Rwanda, it's now 31 years since the genocide, and some people still live with symptoms of that. And how can you think that something very simple, but at the same time, when you have symptoms of trauma that are severe, for many it is like, just give me something, and if it can help me, let me have it. So it is like, but it is like you say, it looks so simple, and often we start by saying it looks also not simple, but also very silly, very
Yeah,
funny, or like a
yeah.
joke. Yeah, no. So that's the preparation for people. It looks like a joke, but just try it. So,
So what about, the professionals, like the experts that handle
mm,
trauma? How do, because this is a very empowering technique too, because they
yeah,
can learn it and then show somebody else and show somebody
yeah,
else. So,
exactly.
well, another thing that you and I talked about before was when the Syria refugee crisis was, and you were working in Greece, you
Mm,
discovered that really the volunteers needed as much
Yeah,
stress relief as the
yeah,
refugees. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that.
yeah.
It's really a full
It's a full
picture.
2016. We were invited. Me and my colleague Ulf was invited to the island of Lesbos, where so many refugees came at that time. And he actually invited us to his organization because, like you said, he saw that so many of those volunteers, because some might remember, I mean, in that time, so many completely unexperienced young people went to Greece to help. It was a completely, if I say, it seems the world has changed a lot in 10 years, but so many went there to help. And that was, of course, I mean, it was good intention and from a very, willing to do something for people in a vulnerable situation. But what happened was that so many, without having any experience of meeting people who come from crisis, I mean, you can imagine people coming from a war and then having had this long journey, a lot of things had happened, then crossing the sea from Turkey to Greece. For somebody who has never seen the sea, it's bad
Mm,
weather. There are 80 people in a raft made
mm,
for 15, So they came, so they were on the shore of this island. And some
mm,
of these volunteers were so stressed that they actually scared the refugee, if I would say, because, stress and trauma is more contagious even than COVID. I mean, it happens directly. So instead of being a stable person who stands, welcome, here you're going to see, we're going to assist you with this and this. They were like shaking, and some would try to, help the babies so they, from hypothermia, all from a good heart. But it became very challenging for people. So that's why we started doing workshops there for volunteers. And we do say that, always start with yourself. Don't help
mm.
somebody if you're not yourself in a stable, balanced mood, or your nervous system is shaking, because it will transmit to the person you're trying to help.
The tea one, the one that included tea, the best thing it was like to greet them and give them a cup of tea. Do you
Ah,
remember that?
yeah, yeah, exactly. I'm sorry. Yeah, because that was where we created this, what we called them, and we is our organization called Peaceful Heart Network. So I say, that's why I say we created the very first aid, which we called TAS, because all techniques have to have three letters.
Of
We call
course.
it TLA in English, three-letter abbreviation, and this one means then T and a smile, because that's what we said, that yeah, much better. And this is really the basics. And that's also a way of saying that everybody can do something to help somebody who is in a crisis. Meaning, help yourself, take deep breaths, do something, do some tapping, do something that helps you to calm down, and
Mm.
offer something, a cup of tea with a smile, because that is really the basis of well being. It's to create some kind of feeling of safety. And when you meet the eyes of somebody with a smile, you get this oxytocin, you get this hormone of well being and connectedness, and you feel like, okay, here's somebody who sees me and even offers me something.
Mm.
So that is really the basis of starting something that can go to healing.
And that is contagious too. That like sense of a welcome, the
Yeah,
smile, like
yeah.
yes.
Havening, it comes from the English word of safe haven, and also, which means a safe place. So that really is a good word, because that's really where healing starts again.
So how do you it's kind of like not how do you convince, but how do you invite people to touch themselves? It's not something that, like for a lot of people, that does not come natural, especially if you're like a hardened aid worker out, in the middle of a crisis. Like how do you invite them, and what do you find when they do?
Well, that's a very interesting question. We have the Peaceful Heart Network. We have created like what we call a manifesto, and it has some parts of it. And one is offer, don't insist. So it's
Mm,
always an offer. So if people don't want to take it, it's like you give a gift. If somebody thinks it's something that smells bad or looks bad, or you don't want to have it, I mean, you don't have to receive it. So that's why we say never insist. Because for me, when I learned TFT, then from the beginning, I wanted to like jump on everybody because I had found something that was so good. Then I learned to hold back, what you say, take a step back, or hold it a bit, and
mm,
rather offer. And my mentor, Dr. Carl Johnson, this professor from the US who I went with here the first time, he was very, very good in that. So I learned so much from him. Don't just say, oh, I'm going to help you with this. And then also we have changed more than treating is to teach people not to treat. If it's somebody who wants to, you can do this tapping on somebody, which is,
Mm.
gives better effect. But we first of all always teach people to do it for themselves. If people don't want to, of course there are people who don't want to or feel strange about it or so. But I've almost never been in a training where somebody says, no, don't try at all. It is like, because
And
they
I
come
think
for a training. I don't go out anywhere and just say, do this. They come for something, and at least they know a bit about what it is. So
that makes total sense.
yeah,
I think it maybe ties more into the previous questions, which is, does it seem too simple? Like
yeah,
for
yeah,
people to think that it's going to have an effect.
yeah.
Mm.
How can you believe that? For some will make some comparisons. Like here in Rwanda, people are, it's a very spiritual country, and many belong to different churches, and also referring to stories of the Bible. There always this way of, it's like we say in Rome, speak as the Romans. You describe things in the way, either it can be for some it's more the nervous system, for others it's the polyvagal theory and the vagus nerve, what you do with that. For others it is like, okay, yeah, God actually created healing points on the body, because if you don't know anything about acupuncture, that is not to be related to either. And then somebody would relate it to, Jesus, he was a healer. And if you look at the stories of his miracles, you could see also that many of them could actually be symptoms of trauma. One was blind, other one lame. All these things can be symptoms of trauma. He lived in a very traumatized society. The Romans, they were torturing people, killing people, taking high taxes. So he did also very simple things to help them. So I'm telling this just for some,
Yeah.
you can relate to those stories, saying that very simple things. And then you look, and then for many, that will be and say, okay, yeah, that's true. That's actually true. This is what I have learned through the years of working with different and being in different places. You realize what to say. In our manifesto, we have another point, and that's the first one. It says like this: take off your shoes and listen first. Meaning, I never come with the answer. I always say, here in Rwanda, I have learned so much more than I have ever been able to share, even if I share the technique. But what I have learned is so much more. And this
Mm.
means take off your shoes and listen first, means don't come and impose things. Again, first listen. What is it people need here? How do they speak? What do they relate to? And then you can do something.
So what are you going to do now? Like it's dark.
Yeah,
You're probably done for the day. So
yeah.
what does one do when one is out in
Yeah,
Rwanda?
now I will wait for my colleague Placide Denkubito, who is away taking it because he felt sick. He wanted to go for a sauna over here. They have wonderful sauna in Rwanda. They have this open water with a lot of eucalyptus and other leaves, so it's steamy and a lot of that kind of smell of like the strong oils from the leaves of the eucalyptus. And then we're going to have dinner at a friend's place, actually, who is a very good Jean Paul. He loves to cook, and he invited us to come to his home, so we will go there. Be nice.
And it sounds wonderful. And this is like warm way of ending this.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on, and go on and have a wonderful evening with a peaceful heart. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for the invitation.